LEED ND is on the brink of its first major update since its launch in 2009. The update is called version 4, or V4 for short. And the second part of our course reviews changes in V4 versus the 2009 system and how they're likely to affect future projects. I'll begin with an overview of the most important changes to rating system structure and content in the certification process, and then I'll run through notable changes in about 30 of the system's prerequisites and credits. Here are the three big types of changes in version 4. First, the previous single rating system has been divided into two rating systems that correspond to what were previously called stages. So there is now a rating system for planned projects, what were previously known as stage 1 or 2, and there's a second rating system for built or constructed projects, or what were previously known as stage 3. Other than being aimed at different stages of development, the two new rating systems are virtually identical in content. The second major type of V4 changes are revisions to prerequisite and credit requirements, which are really the heart of the system. And there's a third category of change that falls into the heading of certification process, where the option for a prerequisite check has been expanded to include design prerequisites, as well as smart location prerequisites, and the ability to continue using a single version of the rating system over the life of a project has been added. To run through the major highlights of these changes, let's check in with Megan Bogarts at the U.S. Green Building Council, where she helped co-author several of the changes.
I would say overall, compared with the commercial rating systems, there are less major changes than you might have seen there in new construction or whatnot. But so in SLO, it would be in bicycle network. Something we wanted to respond to customers about that we heard a lot about is breaking it into two different options now, recognizing both infrastructure for bicycles within the project and then outside of the project in the greater area around it. And then another big one would be our floodplain prerequisite. So we've introduced a new standard that's an international standard called ASCE 24 as a compliance path, which should help out a lot of project teams. These are probably the two biggest things in SLO. Neighborhood pattern and design mostly had small changes. One of the bigger things that will help out some project teams, especially small projects, is in our connected and open community prerequisite, in which we've now added a special compliance path for very small projects to kind of give them a little bit more flexibility. That's probably the biggest thing in that section. We wanted to keep everything sort of seamlessly aligned between the new construction rating system, the homes rating system, and the neighborhood development rating system. So as upgrades were made to those, we made them also in neighborhood development. So the biggest things there would be in the energy prerequisite, upgrading from ASHRAE 90.1 2007 to 2010. In the water prerequisite, you'll see new requirements for water sense labeled fixtures and fittings. And then one other thing would be that we expanded the definition of what a brownfield is to include a couple of other kinds of ways of identifying brownfields. And then maybe the last thing would be rainwater, in which we have incorporated a reference to a new technical manual from the EPA. So the biggest change is really just in how we're talking about the rating systems a little bit. So what we did is we took the LEED ND rating system, and now technically for V4 there are two adaptations, plan and built projects. And the idea with that is just we're trying to be a little bit more explicit that we have a rating system that can certify a plan and a rating system that can certify a constructed project. And the content in those two rating systems is the same, but it just makes it a little bit more clear what we're doing. And what that also means is that the plan stage gets a certification now, and that used to be called a pre-certification.
Before we go through the prerequisite and credit changes in detail, I want to mention the availability of an updated reference guide and certification submission forms. As I talked about in an earlier course, these are key documents for project teams working on certification submissions. So if you're considering pursuing V4 certification, be sure to obtain the new updated reference guide and updated ND submission forms. Another important process change is the expansion of optional prerequisite checks, which are now available for neighborhood design as well as smart location. In cases where project teams have any doubts about their ability to comply with these prerequisites, this is a great way to officially confirm compliance without incurring the time and expense of preparing a full submission, only to find out later that you couldn't achieve a prerequisite. In the smart location category, there's only one notable change in the bicycle credit, where the bike network has been split into two options to recognize separate networks that exist inside and outside a project boundary. In neighborhood design, the biggest changes are in the connectivity prerequisite, where projects of 5 acres or less have a reduced minimum connectivity threshold of 90 intersections per square mile, and an absolute prohibition against gated areas. For projects over 5 acres, the connectivity threshold of 140 intersections per square mile remains unchanged, and gated areas are capped at 10% of total project area. In the green infrastructure and building category, notable changes include updates to building energy and water efficiency standards, and clarification of how non-LEED rating systems must be accredited under international standards in order to be recognized for purposes of ND.